Welcome back to In the Loop. Today I'm joined with a co-host, Tiffany Trueblood.
Hey, Taylor.
Hello. And our president and CEO, Chris Stevens.
Hi, Taylor. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. So we've had two significant winter weather events in just this month. And while they were both super cold, they impacted our systems in very different ways.
That's right, Taylor. I mean, you know how Georgia is. Mm-hmm. You have like a 50, 60-degree day, and then it's 12.
Yeah.
So we did have some. We had back in January 10th, we had our first snow event for a lot of our area. And that one actually had a big impact on us. We had about 13,000 members out during that night. And then we had snow again, just like a week after that, just a little couple days ago. But we didn't have any outages from that. Just really, really cold.
Yeah, right. And Chris, from an operational standpoint, you were involved in preparing for both weather events. But why were these impacts to our system so different?
Sure, Taylor. So when you look at the two storms and the makeup of it, the first storm we experienced, we were anticipating some significant weather damage during that. And the operation that we had prepared, we had crews on standby. And what we did see is an accumulation of freezing rain, and where we had a heavy wet snow and cold conditions, not quite as cold as we experienced this week, but also the freezing rain really was more problematic than what we saw. And with the accumulation of the freezing rain on the power lines throughout the day, what we saw later in the afternoon around 5 p.m. is we had some significant wind gusts come up. And so when you compound the wind with a heavy load on the ice, from the ice on the power, on the limbs, you know, we went from 0 to 13,000 members out in a matter of about 30 minutes. So it was quite frustrating in the sense of how fast it materialized and how much damage it did relative when you look at the weather we had this week. Yes, we experienced snow, but it was very dry and it was very cold conditions. And the two differences is you can see in the type of moisture that you receive, but even though the temperatures are very different, you know, what we saw during this most recent event was significantly more load on our system.
Right. And we have to brag on our linemen and the work by our guys for a second, but can you walk us through the restoration process for an event like that?
Sure. So it's all hands on deck when that happens. So we had all our crews available to us and immediately dispatch. And when you do that, you start, and typically we work our way from the largest outages. So in these conditions, you know, you get widespread and you may have a major circuit out. And so you're going to dispatch your crews to those locations where you had the greatest number of people out. And then you work your way down to the smaller outages. So even though you may be out of power, you may not even know and realize that, hey, you know, the problem may be 2 miles from you because your entire circuit feeding that entire area is out. You may not see the crews working, but they are out there working. However, in some situations, too, during this event, there were a lot of individual outages that certainly saw that. And you might have got a little frustrated, too, at times because why aren't people out here working when, in fact, they were working their way down to that. If we can't get the main source on first, it doesn't do us very much good to get the side taps and the lateral taps and the smaller sections on.
Yeah, you know, and plus, you know, our guys don't want to be out there any longer. They have to. Not in that weather.
No,
not one bit.
No, it's extreme cold conditions, and it's very, you know, tough on those guys. And if you can imagine, you know, when your hands get cold, you're working in these rubber gloves and you're working on these lines, and you know, you just have to rotate guys because literally your hands basically get numb, and it is challenging for those guys. But I can't thank them enough. I mean, when you think about the winter event we had 2 weeks ago, 13,000 members out of power, and basically we got, you know, 99% of that restored within a matter of 12 hours. It's just incredible what our guys were able to do.
Yeah, but not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah.
They wear hard hats and show up in trucks.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so like Chris, what you said, like the difference in like the most recent event, the one we just had, you know, we had ice, but it was mainly like on roadways. It wasn't on our lines or anything. But with those outages, it was super cold, very, very cold. And so many people were stuck at home. So you have a lot of people at home using a lot of power, trying to stay warm or entertain their kids or doing what they're doing. And sometimes that leads people concerns about our system reliability, be able to handle that load of all of our, 90,000 members, be able to use all that power. But we came out okay on considering the amount of load that was probably going through.
Yeah, Tiffany, absolutely. We did exceptionally well, even through this extreme cold weather and temperatures down close to 10 degrees. We really experienced almost zero outages. And it is something we monitor and watch very carefully, even from the statewide level. And you may have heard, even in Tennessee, they actually achieved a one-day peak. So all the utilities were really focused in looking at the system as a whole. And then we looked all the way down to our individual system because we do get into these peak situations, meaning there is a high usage of energy. And what we look at, Coweta-Fayette EMC, typically is what we call a summer peaking type of utility. In other words, we have a lot of natural gas on our system. So in the summer, when it's all air conditioned, everybody's using it. So the winter peaks typically aren't as high. But in these situations, we're seeing a drastic change in that. We're seeing a lot of excessive electric usage during these times, and it's not as widespread necessarily across the system because it's more concentrated in areas because those with gas versus those without. And so our engineering and operations teams have done an outstanding job. We go back to 2022 during Winter Storm Elliott. We had very similar conditions. And, we had not seen anything like that in years and years. So we learned a lot. A lot of system improvements have been made. But it also comes down to our generation mix, too. Not just our distribution system, but our generation mix. And that's the reason it's so critical that we have a balanced approach, because typically what you don't benefit from, you think about the renewables and all the other traditional resources. Renewables, certainly solar, doesn't do you a lot of good at 7 o'clock in the morning when it's this cold. In fact, you're not going to see any solar, and especially when you have cloudy days, you're not going to see that. But one thing we were able to capitalize on, though, is we do have a solar facility coupled with a battery, and that battery had been charged, so we were able to dispatch that battery during those peak conditions, which certainly helps lessen our peak or our contribution from our generating sources outside of our system. So you can see the reason nuclear, coal, natural gas, all of these sources in hydro, they're all critical to making sure we keep the lights on during these peak conditions.
Yeah, it's great to hear how much we've learned from past experiences and diversify the mix so we can handle what's coming down the road. So big kudos to the team here at Coweta-Fayette.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Tiffany, for joining us, and thank you, Chris, for taking the time to talk to us about how we are able to serve our members during events like this.
Yeah, and of course, Taylor, don't forget in today's world, for real-time updates when we're having outages, where things are going on, make sure you follow us on our social media channels. I know we did a lot of updates and stuff, especially on Facebook. We can do more there, but to give updates of people when we can for these large events, or just so they know that we're preparing and what we're doing. And of course, you can always follow our outage map at utility.org and see where you are and how many outages we have and what's going on.
Absolutely.
I want to give a shout out to the whole team. I talk a lot about the operations, engineering, but also you guys have done an outstanding job, communicating with our members, keeping them engaged, keeping them informed. And to your point, it's very critical to stay tuned and keep updated during these situations as things change. And just to know that we're always planning before, so don't necessarily always wait till the event occurs. I know you guys are out there reaching out to our members and providing them information ahead of time, too. So thank you guys for what you do.
Well, ending a podcast on a kudos from the boss man is a great way to go.
Yes,
so
thank you so much.
We're going to end on that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for listening to In the Loop, and we'll see you next time.